Welcome back, beautiful people. This is another episode of An Untold Narrative. And today's guest is another international artist, creative, designer, who bleeds into the footwear industry but isn't traditionally from the footwear industry. Titi Finlay, thanks for joining us. I know you're overseas and you have family and stuff going on, so we super appreciate that. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm so excited to be having this discussion.
Yeah, same. And so like you are similar to a lot of guests that I have on where we know each other through social media, but we've never actually met. So I
Yeah,
always find these conversations the best.
I love
So
it.
I'm very, 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 very excited. Um, where where do you start when people ask you what you do? Because just off the record, you were talking about how you have a fine art degree, and we could get into that. But like, what do you classify yourself as? Because if somebody goes to your social media page, they see a lot of graphics, very bright colors, things like that, sneakers. But like, what do you say when you're sitting next to somebody on an airplane?
Honestly, I struggle every time, but I would say like what I currently do for a living, I guess, right now is I'm an art director and creative strategist. But that's not always been what I've done. I have like experience in almost every part of creative. So, and obviously I'm an artist, which is kind of like my side hustle, I guess. And I do design. So, I mean, I guess it's in terms of my career, I kind of started out like we talked about, I did a fine art degree. So I came to London hoping to be a famous artist. That was my goal in life, and quickly got a rude awakening about how hard that is. So then I ended up working. I initially wanted to go into like journalism and fashion journalism because I was really interested in like sneaker culture and streetwear culture because that was kind of at the time when it was blowing up. So I started out interning at magazines, then I went into a bit of journalism, and then I ended up in social media, which I think every journalist has ended up being. It's basically that is what journalism is now. So I worked in social media for um, quite a long time, actually. I worked at ASOS, which my job there was basically taking care of sneaker brands for social. So that's when I started to get more into sneakers and like working with the big brands and everything. And then there I kind of grew to social creative, and that's how I kind of got my found my way into art direction, and then through art direction and just having worked with brands on because I was doing like design stuff on the side because my husband's a graphic designer, so that was all kind of just like feeding in. And yeah, then I started to get really interested in creative strategy when I worked for a startup. I left ASOS and went to work at Laced, which is a sneaker resale startup, and essentially built from the ground up with a very small team their whole like creative strategy, their look and feel of the brand, and learned so much. And I found that I was like really interested in strategy and how that informs creative. And that's what I do now, freelance. And then obviously on the side, I'm still painting and doing art stuff and brand collaborations.
Do
That's
you,
like the long-winded version, but if I had to cut it down, I would just say artist and creative director, I guess.
no, but that's really beautiful because I've spoken to so many people and it just seems like this through line is that we as creators can't just do one thing anymore.
Yeah,
It's like this massive through line. And so like you talk about the creative direction, you talk about the strategy, you talk about the graphics, and it's like there's no people just don't do one thing anymore. And it's
yeah,
actually like this really fun, beautiful mix because you learn so much more in a condensed period of time.
absolutely.
You did mention something really, really fascinating in the sense of like you wanted to be a famous artist and you realize how hard that was.
Yeah.
What was the most challenging part? Like, is it out of the realm of possibility that you're going to be a famous artist?
I think now I feel like it's more within reach one day, but I think the art world is a very terrifying, confusing place, which is very like closed off. It's not particularly, there's not really like a solid like community of people like in sneakers that you can kind of like grow from that. It's very, I still find it very intimidating, the world. But I think when I first moved here, I was so young. I think I was like 23, and I was so poor. I literally moved here with no money, so I had to work as a waitress for like 3 years while trying to fund my art. And here, like especially in London, you have like the best of the best. So I was like applying for like exhibitions and galleries, like because you can do like open calls, and getting rejected constantly, and it was just really disheartening. And no, I feel like it's no matter how good you are, it's almost about like you have to have like a plan and you have to know people, and it has to be like, I don't know. It's just not easy at all. But I think now that I've kind of gone through, like I've kind of had success as a designer and creative in the sneaker industry, it's given me more confidence because I'm like, if I can do that, when the sneaker industry, when I first broke into it, was a very intimidating place as well, then I can do this again with the art world. I just need to keep working at it. So that's kind of what I'm telling myself right now. But
No, that's super fascinating. It's like you took multiple steps forward by taking the leap of faith, betting on yourself, moving to a new place. You took a step back, realizing how difficult it was. You pivoted,
hmm
and now you're like reintegrating yourself into what you originally set out to do.
exactly. Yeah.
It's kind
And
of
I
a really cool time.
Yeah, and I think that all the skills that I've learned along the way are going to help this journey so much because I've worked in social media. I know how to copyright, I know how to put together a brand and a campaign, and all of that stuff is so important as an artist. I think a lot of artists don't really have those skills. So I'm really hoping that as I'm trying to like focus on building my actual collection of paintings, but when it comes to promoting myself and that time comes, I feel like I'll be ready, and
Hmm.
better equipped, having done this sort of 10-year sabbatical of, yeah, pivoting essentially.
So you did mention that you freelance, but then you also have a side hustle in
hmm
terms of like your art and stuff like that. What's your thought process on doing freelance full time versus working for an organization and then doing your art on the side? Because I think that's a lot of like what creatives like struggle with, right? Like the balance or the structure of a corporate job that
Yeah.
you might not love as much, but you have more freedom and money to do what you're actually passionate about. Versus freelance is kind of scary a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
It's terrifying. But what I found is, when literally the amount of like anxiety I have all the time, but when I actually look back, I've been freelancing for a year, and I've actually made more money as a freelancer than I did in full-time work because I'm able to diversify my income. I've added like obviously like printmaking to part of that income, and obviously working with loads of different brands. And when you work on freelance on a day rate, you're getting paid like three times the amount that you did to do the same job as a full timer. But the only thing is, obviously, that's never guaranteed. So you could go like 3 months without working, but then you could make like half a year's salary in a month. So it's like, it's very up and down. But having done 1 year of it, I feel more confident now in terms of that security. But what I would say is I've had way more time to be able to do my passion projects, my art and design stuff as a freelancer, just because I can completely schedule my own time. As a full-time employee, I found it really draining to be on calls all the time, and by the time it got to like the evening, I would be so frazzled that like I couldn't even think straight. I couldn't even think what to have for dinner, let alone sit down and do like 5 hours of painting. Whereas now
Mm.
I have like, it's almost like I work less but make the same amount of money. Like it's really hard to explain, but I find that like I'm not stressed with work because I'm not like invested in any one business too much, and I'm not like on constant calls with the same people and having all of the energy drained out of me. So even if I work like a full day, I can still go and sit down and paint for like 5 hours every night without feeling that. So there's a huge shift in like how much energy you have for your creative stuff. So I would, it's a scary leap, but I would recommend it to any creatives who have the ability to go freelance. It's definitely the best thing I've ever done.
That, I mean, what you just described on paper sounds like a perfect situation. So, like, are you happy? Like, are you stoked to wake up every day and go to work?
Yes. So I feel like I it's honestly like night and day. Like I suffered from horrific, like crippling anxiety for the last like however many years working full time. And this past year, again, like I've been reflecting a lot because it's been a year since I kind of started this. And I just feel so like relaxed and fulfilled in my life. Like I get up and I can go on like a long hour-long dog walk with my dog in the sunshine every morning, and like I don't have to start work until like 10 a.m. if I don't want to. Or like when I'm on a shoot, it's like really fun because I'm like, this is great, but then I have like the next day I know I can just chill. So it's really changed like mental health wise. Like I feel just more like relaxed in myself. um yeah, it's been awesome.
That's awesome, Nate. I'm stoked for you. You did we did talk a little bit about, you know, your diversification in your art, and kind of even offline we were talking about how like you gained a lot of followers versus a certain, you know, graphic that you put out there. And I definitely wouldn't be doing it justice having you as a guest if we didn't talk about that. Talk through the process of the, you know, kind of the Instagram post that you put out there that got shared. I think I read a stat over 8,000 times,
Yeah,
and like you reached like a stupid amount of accounts or something like that.
yeah.
Like how many graphics did you do beforehand to like finally get one that hit? Or like, you know, was this a one-off and it just
Yeah.
really resonated with people? Talk through that process.
Yeah, so it started with when I think it was 2020, I was chosen as one of the 20 creatives in London to design their own Air Max 90 with Nike. And as part of
Cool.
which I have here, this is my shoe here. But we can talk about that, I guess. But as part of that project, essentially we were given access to obviously design our own shoe, but we were given full creative freedom of how we would market the shoe. So everyone was in charge of like Nike didn't do anything for us. Like everyone was in charge of like doing their own marketing rollout and how they were going to promote their shoe. And my shoe was the story of it was around women and sneaker culture in London, because the whole idea was to like tell your story of London from your point of view. And for me, it was giving representation to female sneakerheads. So as part of the rollout of that campaign, I created this one graphic that was, it said something like, sneaker culture has often been seen as a boys club, but we're changing that. And because I wrote we're changing that, it was from like the point of view of like all female sneakerheads. And I literally just posted that one with the shoe campaign, and it kicked off and it went crazy. So many like I feel like just the whole campaign for that shoe, because it was designed by women for women. Actually, it was designed by women for everyone because it was trying to like lead by example with size runs and stuff. So I think it just like really resonated, and I realized that those graphics could be successful. So the first one I posted was the successful one, and then I think a couple months later I was really frustrated about not being able to get shoes in my size, and seeing like women's exclusives of sneakers coming out that were like stuff women didn't want, and then we wouldn't get the men's sneakers. So that was a really like almost came from a place of like anger and frustration, and I was just like, how can I like say this to my followers that's not just like an Instagram caption, and get people to sort of create more around this discussion. So that's when I was like, let me do another graphic, because that worked really well last time to get people's attention. And this is something that needs to be talked about but isn't being talked about. So I just made another graphic. And again, I know how to do well. At the time I knew how to do a social media engaging post, so I was like, let's do it in a bunch of different colors so people can share it in different colors
Mm-hmm.
that would like match their feed. Or and I deliberately didn't put my name on it either, because I was like, I want this to feel like something other people are sharing on that they're saying, if you know what I mean. So I was like, this
Yeah.
it's not about me, it's about a whole community of women who want this thing. Um and that was the one I think that went crazy, that reached like all over the world. Thousands and thousands of accounts. It was it was crazy, because people just were like, finally someone said something, because we were all thinking it. And yeah, so it just
What?
felt right. It just
And
was like a perfect storm, I guess.
yeah, and at a time where, you know, people are sitting online, right? Like this is during COVID
Yes, this
still,
was like peak
if
COVID.
I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah,
Yeah, so
exactly.
so so that's so thought I didn't know that, like, that was that much thought put into it, and, like, I don't know if anyone else has ever, like, experienced that or, like, thought to think or like, what was that, like, I'm gonna use the word hysteria, like, afterwards, like, it gets shared all over this planet, people fall in love with it, you gain a mass amount of followers, like, what happens next? Are you just answering DMs for the next 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I had a lot of DMs. I shot up, my followers shot up like crazy, which actually like sent me like plummeting into anxiety weirdly because I was like, oh my God, so many people are like watching my Instagram now. I can't like show like my real self. It has to be all about like sneakers, and like I felt so much pressure from it. But the good things that happened was Nike reached out again and they wanted to work with me, and that kind of kicked off a ongoing partnership for the next year and a half, I guess. So and then like brands were like publications were writing about it. High Snobiety did a huge article around it, and even like Sean Wotherspoon shared it on his Instagram, and I was like fangirl, and like it was like crazy because just everybody, it really just got people talking. And I think the most successful thing for me was like not my personal success from it, even though that was incredible to receive, but it actually kicked off like a whole movement, I feel, which was then sort of like escalated even more by all of the women who are starting sneaker platforms during lockdown and actually like speaking up from their point of view as well. And I think it was just this whole moment that just, yeah, to be part of that and to be able to like make that change was incredible, because now fast forward like 3 years, we're seeing so much more consideration for women's sneakers and bigger size runs, and that was like my goal. And I remember writing I have like a manifesting list that's just like a checklist on my phone, but like I remember writing like make brands actually like make sneakers for all sizes, and I feel like I can check that off for the most part now, because it's been really cool to see like the change and actually be able to speak to Nike. Like I speak to their design teams like maybe 4 times a year on like what products they're bringing out, and to be able to have like a voice in that is incredible. So yeah, it's that was the best part, I would say.
That's like I have goosebumps just like hearing that story. It's like if you like in 25 years, you can look back on this moment in history and just be like, I was part of this
Yeah,
bigger
yeah,
wave that
yeah,
happened in ripple effect.
for sure.
And there's not a lot of people that can say they were part of something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I feel super proud of that. It's like a really good feeling.
So how do you handle it? You mentioned it's been a few years now, life's gone, let's call it back to normal.
Hmm.
Like how do you ever think about how do I top something like that? Like are you competitive with yourself like that? Like
Yes.
what's the next greatest thing I can do?
Yeah, and the hardest thing for me was like I loved that there was this constant like trajectory for a couple of years, where it was leading to like Nike design collabs and bringing that message on an even bigger scale. Like I did like pop-ups at like Nike Town and Oxford Street, where I took over like 2 floors of like my messaging around like making sneakers gender neutral and all of that. And I think that was like a really exciting time. And then yeah, I always think to myself like, how can I guess like push that forward? And I'm a very like sort of driven person, but I also feel like for the last couple of years it hasn't felt like natural to do anything, because I'm like it only all that stuff came from a place of frustration and wanting to actually make a change, whereas I actually feel like so much positive change has happened in that space that I don't need to do that, if you know what I mean. So I'm trying to just like let it be, and I know that my ideas always just come to me when they're meant to. So yeah, for me like my new thing, like we talked about, is like I've pivoted to where I feel like my work is kind of done on that subject, I guess. I'm still like a huge sneakerhead. I still stay in like sort of as you can see from this pile of boxes behind me, but like
Yeah.
you can like I still love it. It's still my biggest passion, but now I'm like, what's the next thing for my life? And I'm more focused on like building a collection of paintings and becoming successful in the art world, while still trying to remain in that space, I guess. So yeah, it's
So yeah, let's we could talk about that a little bit, right? Like cuz the idea of closing a chapter of your life because
mm,
the work is done is
hmm,
actually really rare for a creative. Like
hmm,
to just be like I've completed my mission and my goal with this, and I'm
Yeah.
okay to move on now. People like hang on to these things because they
Yeah.
had success. So
Yes.
they're like persistent on doing it again.
Yeah.
And you've decided to just shift away from that and refocus on what you want to do versus just
Yeah.
pushing into that, which is really, really fascinating. And so now you transition back into art, right? And so
Yeah.
you're working on these paintings for 5 hours at a time, which is crazy.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I think you have your first solo exhibition coming up or
Hopefully,
coming
at
out
the end of the
eventually.
year, I'm planning for it. I think I have a space, so I'm like, but it's going to be TBC on how many paintings I have because I'm trying to get my time down. I take like so long to make a painting, like at least a month for one painting. So yeah, I'm just like trying to be strict with myself and hopefully it'll come to life.
What if there's one like takeaway or thing that you hope that happens with your solo exhibition? Like what's your one goal that you would want to happen? Is
I
it just the thought of doing it?
Yes, I think the doing it will be a huge success in itself because it's something that I've said I'm going to do for the last like 10 years. And every year I get more distracted with like full-time work or Nike projects or whatever. So when I finally do this, that will be completing that goal for me will be incredible. But I would love to then have some sort of recognition within the art world that then leads me to bigger exhibitions. Whatever that may look like. Yeah, I just really want to like start exhibiting at like bigger galleries and yeah, have some sort of recognition, I guess, from that world because I haven't had it for ever basically. So yeah,
Well,
that's my
where
goal.
we could pry a little bit. Where does that drive or like influence come from to try to make a staple in the art world? Like was it like something younger that you were inspired by, or like were your parents creative? Like where are you getting fueled to like somebody
Yeah.
being like really like you got a chip on your shoulder about it?
Yeah, I'm like, well, so art is literally like all I've like ever wanted to do my whole life. Like when I was a kid, from like the age of 6, I was drawing and going to like art classes, and that's always been the thing that I felt like is almost like what I was put on this world to do. I just feel like I have this like ability, and wasting it every time that I'm not doing something like being successful at it. And I think I also so when I went to art school, I struggled because it was a very like art school is very conceptual driven. It's like it doesn't matter if you're like an incredible hyper realistic draftsman or painter, if you don't have like some sort of crazy concept, you're not going to do well. And I really struggled because what I do is essentially I paint what I see and I can make like hyper realistic sort of paintings. But I never really wanted to do like installations or like the crazy stuff that like a lot of artists get recognition for. So I think there was definitely like moments in art school where I was like, I'm gonna prove to you that I can be successful just as a painter. Um, and I'm trying now to kind of bring in more conceptual, like tie it into a wider concept, but still focus on just paintings. And I think yeah, that's probably where it came from. But I've always been very like driven to be successful. It's always been like on my mind. So yeah, just never giving up.
Is there like a theme to what you're gonna put out there? Is it sneaker related, like, or is it just something completely different that's just been in your mind for a long time?
It's so last year I started the foundations of a brand called Things. And I basically want to make my first exhibition called Things. And it's essentially an exploration into like humans' obsession with objects. And so sneakers are what kind of kicked that off. Because for me, I'm like, why do I have so many pairs of sneakers? They literally make up a whole part of my personality. Like I tie so much of my self-worth to that almost, and it's like why they're literally just objects. And it's the same with people with collecting like toys or I don't know, like even trying to think like pieces of art. Like
Hmm.
why do people like are obsessed with like certain objects, like even like when people are obsessed with like cool chairs and stuff and like pieces of furniture, it's like that makes up part of your identity. So that's kind of the loose topic. It's like humans and their things essentially, and the paintings will all be paintings of things that are just like singled out on a white background, so it's like all you focus on is that item. And yeah, there'll be like obviously a bit of a spiel about why I got to this idea, but yeah, that's the loose concept. There will be a lot of sneaker paintings in there for sure.
I love that. And you know what's really fascinating about the things concept is like, so on your Instagram page you can go to your like link tree or whatever it is, and like your website's like
Yeah.
things that God, there's
Yeah.
like a zillion T's in there.
Yeah.
Is that like thoughtful? How are people supposed to find that website?
Yeah. My dad said that to me. He was like, "How's anyone supposed to find that?" But I was like, "I know people will just go on it for my Instagram anyway." So like, but the whole T, I was just like, it's like my name, kind of like
Yeah.
because it's TT. So I was just like, it's kind of fun to do that. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it was so creative. It was so creative when I stumbled on it that I was like, "There's something here. There's
yeah,
something to be said about doing something so productive like this."
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
outside of this exhibition that's coming out that you're obviously putting a lot of your time and your energy into, like, do you think about the future a lot? Do you think about what's right in front of you? Like, do you have other, you mentioned like a checklist on your phone or like in a
Yeah.
journal, like do you have other ambitions that you want to accomplish, whether personally or creatively or just career wise?
Yeah. I mean, my goal is to kind of continue, like, I think what I've discovered this last year is this feeling of fulfillment and work-life balance where I just feel so chilled, but also feel like I'm creating incredible things. And I kind of just want to expand that for the rest of my life, like literally have that feeling forever. But in terms of personal goals, I really obviously want to buy a house. That is like my big goal right now, which we'll see in this current market. But yeah, that's a big one. And in terms of like professional goals, as like the last couple of years I've been sort of becoming more and more like a creative director, so I'm kind of really focusing on that in the last 6 months, as a freelancer, and just kind of like building on that, because eventually it would be really cool to be the creative director of a brand, while doing my art stuff as well. So that's kind of like where I see myself, I guess. Yeah. And then exhibiting at like
Yeah,
the
no,
world's biggest galleries, hopefully.
yeah, I think it's cool that like you threw in like people forget like we are real humans, and like buying a house or like
Yeah.
real life achievements is also part of the dream.
Yeah.
So I think that's really fascinating. Is there is there one thing that you struggle with the most, like on a day-to-day basis or week to week or month to month? Like, do you know, whether it's burnout or you know, you mentioned anxiety previously when you were doing working for a brand, or like or have you like resolved that through your creations that you've been handling lately?
Yeah, I think my biggest one is anxiety. And imposter syndrome is a big one for me. Like no matter how much success I have, I always put so much pressure on myself and sort of feel like I there's someone out there that could be doing this way better than me. But I think it's definitely gotten better over the last few years. Just as I grow older and kind of more, I find it really helps when I look back at what I've done and I'm like, I did that. Like, let's just take some time to remember that we can do it again. And it's like, I'm capable of things like that. So, yeah, I think the more time goes on, the better you get with it, I guess. But that's probably my worst thing. Yeah.
I think I think that's a tremendous piece of advice. I don't think we look back on how far we've come or what we've accomplished, even in like
Mhm.
short sprints of like quarter 2 this year, because we're in Q3 now, like
Yeah.
how much we actually did instead of being like, oh, I didn't do enough yet this year. I do this
Yeah.
all the time, by the way.
Yeah.
I really struggle with that of always trying to do more. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Dave, like, you're good. Like, chill the fuck out.
Yeah, literally. It's so true. It's just sometimes you like look back and you're like, why am I being like this? Like you've achieved so much. So yeah.
Definitely something I struggle with. But I think that's a great piece of advice, just to like pause and look backwards. Is there this is something that's turned into a closing tradition on this podcast is we've obviously gotten some sort of recognition or fame or success to this point in our careers. Is there 1, 2, 10 people that you want to like give flowers to while we're here, and just shout somebody out that's really helped you along the way, and whether that was creatively or whatever it is. I think there's always an opportunity to give people some flowers and give them a shout out.
Definitely, I love that. Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, the majority of the people who have helped me have been women. And so I think first and foremost, my sister is literally, she moved to London a couple of years ago now, started her own social media agency, and she's doing so well. But she's like my best friend and the one person that I can talk to about almost anything. Like she sort of supports me and pushes me forward, and I think having that support network as well as my best friends and all of us are right, like we have a really tight sort of close knit group, and they've been like, yeah, everything's particularly on like the anxiety front, they're always there for me. And then obviously my husband Lewis, who is a graphic designer slash just the coolest person I know, and I feel like I've learned so much from him as a creative. He's also very like, what's the word, like he's very like methodical with the way he creates, and there's a lot of times where I'm like kind of come in and I'm a bit crazy with like half-assing stuff, or I'm just like, I just want to see the thing come to life, I don't want to go through the processes. And that's one of the best things I've learned from him, is like you have to go through the steps and like really learn and like hone your craft. So yeah, I feel like he's taught me so much in that sense, as well as all the support. I think there is one woman who, she's a journalist. She's actually like a mum now, and she's kind of like out of the fashion journalism world. But at the time when I first was deciding I wanted to, basically, I worked as a waitress for obviously 3 years when I first moved here, and I really didn't know anyone in the creative industries in London, and I felt really hopeless about like, I knew I wanted to work in that industry somehow, but I had no idea how. And one day I like plucked up the courage to email this journalist who I'd been looking up to. She's a fashion journalist for like all the big magazines in London. And she emailed me back immediately. I basically asked if I could be an intern for free to learn from her. And she was like, yes, absolutely. And like that moment I remember was such a turning point for my whole career, because someone believed in me, and she took the time to, because to me at the time, like influencers were like these famous people that like were completely out of reach, and she met up with me and gave me so much advice. And I just remember that moment so much that I was like, oh my God, I can do this. Like she thinks I can do this. And it was just, yeah, super special. So her name is Catherine Ormerod. She probably, I don't know if she'll listen to this, but she was incredible for me. And yeah, I mean, everyone at Nike who've given me, like, they're just, the whole Nike team have all been lovely. And I think they really gave me such an amazing platform. And then my momager, who's like my manager for my design projects, and she's like also one of my best friends. I call her momager, but she's, yeah, she also just like takes care of me and like does all the negotiation stuff, which is really helpful. And she's just the best. Yeah, I have so many. I'm just grateful to everyone that I've worked with as well. But yeah.
I really love that. I never know where people are going to go. Maybe it's their parents or whatever. Like all of those stories were perfect and definitely clippable. So I appreciate you sharing
Awesome.
that story. There is something that, like, there's still this stigma. As easy it is to access people, whether it's email, DMs, whatever it is these days, there's still that like fear hump for people to go get over and just send the damn message. And
Yes.
yeah, you're probably going to get rejected, but then there's going to be a story like yours where it changes your entire life.
Exactly. And that's what after I did that one thing, it gave me so much confidence to just like reach out to anyone or just go for it, because I'm like, what's actually going to happen if they don't reply? They're going to forget about you. No one's going to know you did it. So you're not going to get embarrassed. But the best thing that could happen is that they do come back to you and you end up having like a new mentor or opportunity. And I still apply that to this day to like, if I want to like collaborate with someone on something, or I'll just reach out to them. I'm like, I don't care how famous you are. I'm gonna I'm gonna message you and hope for the best and just see what happens. And like, because people don't care. Like, I don't remember every single DM I got. So yeah, it's like just take the shot basically and see what happens. It's always
I
worth it.
love that. TT, thank you for sharing that. That was incredible. Final question is where can people find your work? Where can people look into you, your journey, follow along for the future of the art exhibition? What's the best way to reach you?
I think probably just my Instagram. It's at Titi Finlay. Yeah, I do. I basically just use that. So yeah, and then my website, things with 10 T's, things.com. But yeah, it's like
I love that. Well, we'll link both in the description. Titi, this has been phenomenal. I super appreciate you taking the time and chatting with us.
Yeah, of course. It's been such a nice chat. So honored to be asked.